In Fremont County, Idaho, doomsday mom Lori Daybell getting ready to go back to court fighting the grand jury indictment which seeks the death penalty tonight. We'll take a closer look at this case and why prosecutors want Lori Daybell put in the death chamber.
Tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
In Fairfax County, Virginia, big shakeup in Amber Heard's legal team. Her top attorney is out. What will this mean for her case? And will Johnny Depp ever see a dime of the money she owes him?
No matter what happens, I did get here, and I did tell the truth.
I am harassed, humiliated, threatened every single day.
And on the docket tonight in Delaware County, Ohio, the next live trial on Court TV. Matthew Moore accused of murdering his wife and staging it to look like a suicide.
And she's very, very close to her friends. Her friends are like family. So the fact that no one would know where she was or that she would go missing told me that there was something really wrong.
Plus, Alec Baldwin said his finger was not on the trigger when he shot and killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins. But a new FBI report says the only way the gun fires is if the trigger is pulled. Tonight's 13th juror question: why do you think Alec Baldwin said he didn't pull the trigger? Get ready. This hour of closing arguments starts right now. I'm Vinnie Politan. Great to have you with us here on Closing Arguments. The biggest trial of 2023. I already know what it is. It's already scheduled to happen in January. It's the doomsday couple. It's a case we've been following since the beginning. Since the beginning. Talking about Lori, should I call her Daybell? Vallow Daybell? Ryan Vallow Daybell? I don't know. She had 5 husbands. She's been charged with the murder of her children. She's been charged with the murder of her husband. She's facing the death penalty. Her husband, Chad Daybell, the 5th husband. She's charged with the murder of the 4th husband. It gets complicated if you don't know the case, okay? It gets very complicated very quickly. But now she's getting ready for trial. She's been deemed competent to stand trial. That was an issue for a little while. And now there's going to be a hearing tomorrow. You'll see it here on Court TV. Chanley Painter, Court TV legal correspondent, has a preview of what's going to happen tomorrow.
Lori Daybell back in court again as her attorneys argue a motion to remand her indictment to a grand jury. They want to clarify language used in the indictment against her, saying 2 of the counts listed are overly complicated because they include 2 separate allegations. At issue are 2 of the charges related to the deaths of her children, 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ, and wrongfully collecting Social Security survivor benefits on their behalf. The counts are labeled conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception. The defense claims those are 2 separate crimes and should not be rolled into one, so they want the grand jury to redeliberate and indict each separately. It's one of several pending motions being taken up at this hearing. The defense is also asking the judge to order the grand jury to make probable cause findings as to each alleged aggravating factor prosecutors cite in their notice to seek the death penalty against Lori. And they want to reserve their rights to future motions and objections. This hearing for Lori was initially meant to include her husband, Chad Daybell, but that changed after lawyers reached an agreement on hotly contested DNA testing. The stipulation reached allows for consumptive DNA testing, called consumptive because it literally consumes the evidence and may not leave enough of a sample for each side to run their own test. Nevertheless, the parties agreed to allow the state lab to test the samples on the condition that each side can split whatever remains. Slated to be tested are hairs on duct tape inside the body bag used to transport the remains of JJ. ridge detail or fingerprints on the adhesive side of tape associated with JJ's body, swabs of those tape areas, and small dark spots on the handles of a shovel and pickaxe recovered from a garage or barn on the Daybell property. Also, swabs from fingernails from JJ's right hand obtained during his autopsy. The last time Chad and Lori appeared in court together in person was March 2020, after Lori was arrested in Hawaii and brought to Idaho to face felony charges in relation to her then missing children. Now, nearly 2.5 years later, the pair face multiple counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of Lori's children, Tylee and JJ, and Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Their trial is currently set for January 2023.
January 2023, it's all going to happen. Now, tomorrow, a big part of this is they want to send stuff back to the grand jury, and part of it involves the death penalty, and that's been a controversial part of this case for some people, thinking that, well, maybe you shouldn't seek the death penalty in a case like this, or maybe it's not appropriate. And then there have been people making the comparison to another mother charged with the death of a child who was facing the death penalty that was found not guilty. Not going to mention a name. So let's talk about this tonight. Let's bring in our think tank. Join us tonight in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. In Stamford, Connecticut, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crosland. And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, family law attorney Jennifer Brandt. Great to see everyone tonight. You know, and I think we may have even talked about this last week, and it comes up again. It comes up again. The death penalty for a mother accused of the murder of her children. To me, extremely appropriate. These children, especially JJ, relied upon and trusted 1,000% their mother to take care of them, to protect them, to provide for them. And she's charged with the ultimate betrayal of that trust, that broken trust. To me, a major aggravating factor, in addition to all the other ones that will be argued by the prosecution in this case, Al.
Very valid point. Tough to argue on that. As you know, I'm not a proponent of the death penalty, but if I was going to look at a case that I thought was appropriate, it certainly would be a case like this. However, the one thing, Vinnie, that is kind of troubling is her mental condition. And that fact that, you know, she was not deemed to be able to stand trial, and now she's suddenly got better and she's able to go forward at that point. Who knows what she was like at the time of the murder of these two kids?
Oh, we kind of know. We kind of know, Al. We know that she was well enough to go to Hawaii to marry the recently widowed Chad Daybell. She was well enough to pick out matching outfits for the ceremony down in Hawaii. She was well enough, Darnell Crosland, to be walking around Hawaii with a bag full of money from insurance proceeds from the tragic death of Tammy Daybell. She was well enough that when police came to her house looking for JJ on a wellness check, she was well enough to then disappear from Idaho. So I don't know what Al's talking about, Darnell.
Well, first of all, the whole competency to stand trial is a big charade. You have these people in Connecticut we call a 5456D. That's a competency evaluation. So if you have any kind of question about your client, you say, Your Honor, I'm asking for an order of 5456D. And all that does is they go and say, do you know your name? Do you know where you live? Do you know what day today is? Can you count to 1 to 5? Up, ready to go for trial. And so that really means nothing. So the only thing we have in terms of whether she's competent enough is all the things that you just mentioned, Vinnie, going around, planning weddings, et cetera. That shows that she's competent, not that little evaluation that they do. So we just have to see where it goes from there.
Jennifer Brandt, your thoughts about this case being the death penalty, worst of the worst. These two accused of murdering his wife. She's also accused of murdering her husband, but that was in Arizona, different state. That won't be part of this trial, but will be a trial in the future. her brother shot and killed him. Also accused of the murder of children. Her daughter her remains were burnt and placed in the pet cemetery. Little JJ, special needs child who was adopted. I mean, to me, it doesn't get much worse than, I don't know how it could get worse than this.
I agree with you, Vinny. And the amount of people that are dead in the wake of Chad and Lori. I mean, her husband, his wife, her brother, the children. I mean, it seems like everyone around them disappears or something tragic happens to them. And especially as most troubling are the children, because as you pointed out, I mean, what's worse than a mother killing her own children? A mother is a person that the children should be able to rely on no matter what, and should always be there for them and always there to protect them. And especially these children, especially JJ. I mean, he was special needs. He really was a needy child, a troubled child. And I mean, for her to turn around and do something like this, it seems very cold and calculating. The competency, which you raised before, I mean, there are a lot of witnesses that observed her around the time of these murders. Chad's children are coming out and saying things about her, you know, how calculating she was, and other people who were around this couple who I think will be able to testify as to her level of competency and that she totally knew what was going on. So it seems like it was something very well planned between the two of them with the pet cemetery and just everything lines up. It's a troubling case, and one, if there is going to be a case for the death penalty, I mean, it seems like this one is it.
And we've got video from body cameras. We've got audio from phone calls that were recorded, and you can hear where she's coming up with the answers, the excuses. And then the great interview down by our friend at East Idaho News, chasing her down in Hawaii, and she has, and this is at the point where we're still looking for the children. She couldn't be bothered. Al, I've listed some of the aggravating factors that the prosecution is going to argue in this case. I want to put them up on the screen. Because I think they speak volumes about the allegations here. Murders were committed for remuneration. You talk about insurance money. You're talking about getting other benefits. You've got murders were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. Pet cemetery, burnt remains. By the murders or circumstances surrounding their commission, the defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. I think that goes right along with the prior aggravating factor. The defendant, by her conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murders at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murders which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. And this, Al, is where we get to the whole list of people, one after the other. I mean, her brother died under mysterious circumstances. No one's been charged there, but like the day that they're digging Tammy, her new husband's wife who passed away, when they're exhuming her body, that's the day that somehow her brother dies on the toilet. Then she had another prior husband who was the father of Tylee. He died, but that was natural causes also. I mean, so much death, to me, that aggravating factor just like is jumping off the page. That she'd be dangerous if she got out.
Well, she's dangerous because she's part of this, like, she's got this cult mentality. I mean, she's a whack job. I mean, there's no argument that she's nuts. There's no argument that she doesn't deserve to ever see the light of day again, and that she is a danger to the community. I mean, you know, as the Ramones put it, I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery, Vin. That's my statement.
All right, Darnell, now here's the other factor here. Maybe I'll go to Jennifer on this one because it's almost more family law.
Vinny, I'm shaking my head here.
What?
To Al.
You're shaking.
I'm shaking my big head to Al. I disagree.
Wait, like the Ramones?
You disagree?
Yes.
Explain.
He can't say that there's no question that she needs to be put away forever. She's presumed innocent, and you know I'm a proponent of that. I don't care how bad the facts sound. She's presumed innocent. So until the jury comes back with a verdict, don't take that presumption from her. And so that's why I leave it alone.
Well, is the presumption for all of us, or is that just for the jury? Because Al's not going to be on the jury. He does not live in Idaho.
No, that's right. But I want him to be, as a barrister, to not help them take away that presumption of innocence from people So it looks bad. We'll see where it goes, but she's presumed innocent.
I agree.
This is
She's
not a
presumed
trial.
innocent by the jury, but I've seen a lot of this evidence already.
Yeah.
Jennifer, Brandt, let me ask you about the couple that we're looking at right here. They have not been together for 2.5 years in the same room. They've spoken on the phone just before, on the day he got arrested. But are you surprised that the attorneys have not set it up so they would be together in court? There's always a reason why one is there and the other isn't. And I'm wondering if that maybe should tell us something about where they are in their relationship and how this trial may ultimately play out inside the courtroom. The fact that they haven't been together.
Yeah, I mean, Vinny, I think when it comes right down to it, look, these people had multiple marriages, had multiple partners. This wasn't true love.
Chad just had, no, Chad was very traditional. I mean, his world was very, like, he was just a grave digger. He was a working man, raising a family, great kids.
He went off the rails with his views on things and got really extreme, and then ended up with Lori, and his wife disappeared.
I think he became
died.
enamored with her because before Tammy passed away, he was making out with Lori over on the BYU campus in East Idaho.
Well, you know, Vinny, I always say it's not one person's going to take away from your marriage. I mean, there was definitely trouble there to begin with. It wasn't just Lori that she was so great or so attractive.
It was definitely just Lori.
But Vinny, to your question, I see it. I think they're going to turn on each other in court. I don't see them as being aligned. I don't think, you know, the fact that they're not together, I don't really think matters. I think each is going to do what they need to do to protect themselves and try to put on the best defense that they can. And if that means throwing the other one under the bus, so be it. That's the way I would see it, because I just don't see them getting together on this. And I think they have some competing interests for sure. As to, you know, what they're going to say about each other. So I don't see them as being a happy couple anymore.
Are you saying there may be a husband number 6 somewhere down the road? Wow.
Could be. You
All right.
just never know.
We shall see.
It won't be Darnell. I don't think it's going to be.
It won't be Darnell. Are you sure?
No.
Not Darnell. Al Wunsch, Darnell, Crosland, Jennifer Brandt staying with us the whole hour. When we come back, Amber Heard. Big shakeup in her legal team as she continues to pursue her appeal. We've got the latest.
She finds pictures of another woman, naked pictures of a woman, and text messages which show that he's clearly having an affair. She gets extremely mad. Amber can be jealous too. She can get angry. You know, she's half his age, defiant, and we're not going to say she's perfect. You know this case is being televised, right?
I am aware that there are cameras.
And so this gets you your 15 minutes of fame, doesn't
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
it? I can ask that question.
Overruled.
I'm not seeking any 15 minutes here. Though you're welcome to speculate. I could say the same thing by taking Amber Heard as a client for you.
A little argumentative, don't you think?
Oh, hardly. I find that to be purely logical.
Your next witness?
Your Honor, the counterclaimant Amber Heard rests.
All right.
Here we are. 6 weeks of your time, precious time. 6 weeks of this court's time. For what? For nothing. Only to go after Amber. That's psychological abuse.
Elaine Bredehoff, lead counsel for Amber Heard, now out off of Amber's team as she continues to pursue her appeal. Let's take a look at a statement from Elaine Bredehoff. She said, "This is the perfect time to pass the baton. I have pledged to Amber and her appellate team my complete cooperation and assistance as they move forward on a path towards success." Think Tank still with us. Darnell, Crosland, what's really going on here?
Well, she's filing an appeal. So a lot of times you have trial litigators who aren't really prepared, or it's not their specialty to do appeals. But I think she did the right thing by saying that she'll assist the appellate team, because it's important for the appellate team to know the entitled transcript from the trial and to know the demeanor and the tone of the witnesses and things that the trial lawyer might have picked up that the appellate lawyers won't. So I don't see anything bad with that. Nothing bad at all.
All right, let's take a look at Amber's new attorneys. Defended the New York Times against Sarah Palin's defamation lawsuit. Represents journalists, news organizations, documentary filmmakers. And David is a former federal prosecutor and first chair trial lawyers. Here's their statement. We welcome the opportunity to represent Ms. Heard in this appeal, as it is a case with important First Amendment implications for every American. We're confident the appellate court will apply the law properly without deference to popularity, reverse the judgment against Ms. Heard, and reaffirm the fundamental principles of freedom of speech. Jennifer Brandt, is this about the First Amendment?
Well, according to them, it is. And I think that, I mean, I agree with Darnell. Coming in as new counsel, it's a new case, really. It's an appeal. I think it gives Amber a fresh start, and a new court is going to be looking at this, and maybe she wants some new people to come up with some arguments for her, some different arguments for her.
Al, the First Amendment doesn't protect lies, does it?
No, it does not.
Then how is this a First Amendment case? The jury said she lied. They didn't believe her. They listened to her for a bunch of days. They didn't believe her.
The interesting thing is that her trial counsel didn't argue First Amendment either. I don't really remember that they set up an argument along those lines. I don't remember having any con law experts come in and talk about what constitutes free speech and what constitutes speech that's not protected. And, I mean, certain lies may be protected if it's an opinion that maybe is based on your representation or what you thought you saw. That's not necessarily a lie, and that may be protected. But the bottom line is that, as I understand, when you move to the next level, you had to have argued that in the lower level in order to be able to go forward. I mean, like I said, I mean, these guys are real good con law lawyers. They're from Philadelphia. They know their stuff. I mean, they did a great job in the New York Times case just recently, and they know con law like there's no tomorrow. But that's what they were arguing throughout, was a con law thing. And so I'm a little, surprised that they're doing this at this point.
Vinnie, if I can add two things. One, they can appeal sua sponte, which means they don't have to show that there was errors in the lower court in order to have an appeal. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm surprised the Playboy King hasn't mentioned Larry Flynt, Hustler. He was one of the biggest cases on free speech, and that was a great show of what the First Amendment covered. So Al needs to
except that Larry Flynt didn't own Playboy. Larry Flynt is not Playboy.
I didn't know that Al was the Playboy King.
Yeah, well,
he is, and Italian and American versions.
And that was actually a classic Court TV trial back in the day, by the way. Here's a statement from Amber Heard's spokesperson. When it comes to protecting the fundamental right of freedom of speech, we look at the jury's decision to paraphrase a famous quote, not as the beginning of the end, but merely the end of the beginning. A different court warrants different representation, particularly as so much new evidence is now coming to light. I don't fully understand this whole thing, but to me it was pretty clear that the trial was he said, she said. Yeah, there were a bunch of other witnesses around, there were a bunch of recordings, etc. But at the end of the day, they didn't believe her. You don't have a First Amendment right to lie. You just don't. I know he's a public figure, but the argument was very clear that she was lying about something that she had firsthand knowledge of. So if they believed she was lying, she knew she was lying about it. Jennifer, I mean, I'm trying to see where they're going to go here, unless they're going to get the jury to say, we lied, we really believed her.
I think they're going to go, I would think, and I don't know, but I would think that they would go more about, her putting her statements out to the newspaper, and this is what she believed. I understand your point, Vinnie. The jury said that she lied, and it wasn't true. And I get that, but I think this is more.
So what you're saying is, wait, I just want, because I think you're making a great point right here, by the way, like you always do.
Thank you, Vinnie. Thanks, Vinnie.
But in her own mind, she didn't think she was lying. She really saw herself as a victim of domestic violence, and that's why it was her right to speak.
That's what I think. I mean, she was airing out what she believed to be her truth. Maybe the jury didn't find that it was true, but
Well,
in
let's
her mind, this was
talk
her
about
truth.
that. That's an important piece of this, Darnell. When we say, because that's a phrase a lot of people are using now, my truth, like it's my truth. But does my truth matter in a defamation case? Isn't it just about the truth?
Well, it's really two things with the appeal: United States versus Strickland. So we haven't heard that come up yet, but and they're trying to be nice to each other with the appellate team versus her old lawyer. But they're going to obviously argue ineffective assistance of counsel at one point, and they're going to say that she failed to, as Al said, point out that there's protected free speech. She failed. Her trial lawyer failed to bring out those constitutional experts to talk about whether what's the truth or what's not or what's protected. We didn't see a lot of that. So when you look at United States versus Strickland and saying that your lower counsel was ineffective, then they get a chance to argue sua sponte things that they didn't argue before. And I think that's where we're going to be heading.
Okay, Al Wunsch, final question to you. You ready? Which is more likely? Which is more likely? A sequel to this trial or a sequel to the Pirates movie?
I think it's going to be the Pirates movie, Vin. But let's just remember what the great philosopher George Costanza once said. It's not a lie if you believe it.
Yeah, well, there you go. All right, they're staying with us. When we come back, we're going to take you on the docket. Next live trial here on Court TV, the staged suicide murder trial. Prosecutors say it's murder. The defense is saying, no, it was suicide. Prosecutors saying, well, you tried to make it look like a suicide, but it really wasn't a suicide. You're taking a look there at the victim, Emily Noble. Her good friend is going to join us live. On the docket tonight, the next live trial here on Court TV is set to begin tomorrow right here on your front row seat to justice. It's a case involving a woman who died. Now, it looked like a suicide, but it's been charged as a murder. Prosecutors say the defendant staged it, tried to make it look like his wife had committed suicide, when in fact they believe he committed murder. Court TV crime and justice reporter Matt Johnson is in Ohio and has the latest for us tonight.
Hey, Vinny, this has been a big question in this farming community for years. The question before this jury is going to be, was it murder or was it suicide? Court TV cameras are set up in this Delaware County Common Pleas courtroom, ready for the murder trial of Matthew Moore to begin. Moore is accused of the brutal killing of his wife, Emily Ann Noble. Noble went missing in May of 2020 after her 52nd birthday. Her severely decomposed remains were found on the bikeway less than a half mile from her home. Her husband of 2 years was indicted in June of 2021. On Tuesday, 72 people will arrive for jury duty. Panels of 24 potential jurors will be rotated through this jury box until 12 jurors and 4 alternates are selected. Opening statements could begin after lunch. Prosecutors will argue Emily was murdered, strangled to death with a USB cord, and her death was staged to look like a suicide. Prosecutors also expected to call witnesses to testify the injuries to her nose, head, and neck could not have occurred from a hanging. Emily's friends are also expected to testify that she was not suicidal at the time of her death.
We felt like we knew Emily, and to have her husband sort of giving us this narrative that she's crazy and she either joined the Amish or killed herself or she's doing drugs in this part of town. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Moore's defense will argue that Matthew loved his wife, reported her missing, and posted flyers all over town, flyers that included his own cell number. He even reached out to producers of the Vanished podcast to highlight her case. Moore's defense will challenge the coroner's report and call their own team of witnesses, including a therapist, to highlight Emily's state of mind when she died. The state of mind Emily's friends say was triggered by her accused killer.
No one really knew Matt. When they started to date, in hindsight, we see that he sort of isolated her from her friend group. We didn't really recognize it at the time. It was a short amount of time. People get busy. And then the pandemic happened shortly before she went missing.
Moore is facing 2 counts of murder, purposeful murder, and murder while committing a felony, and 1 count felonious assault. And Vinnie, he is in a Delaware County jail being held on $2.5 million bond. This trial could potentially last 2 weeks. Vinnie?
All right, Matt Johnson in Columbus, Ohio. Joining me now by phone in Columbus, Ohio, special guest, a friend of Emily Noble, the victim in the case. Tondra Van Allen is with us. Tondra, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start here. Tell us a little bit about your friend Emily, the life that she was living, the type of person that she was.
Sure. I've known Emily for over 30 years. We were roommates in college. She went to Ohio State and graduated in photography. In psychology. And she was just a wonderful person, very kind-hearted, always looking to lend a hand if you needed it. And everybody loved her. I mean, she was a big part of the community. She was a presence in ComFest, a large community festival in Columbus that has been going on since the 70s. They honored Emily with a tree and a plaque in her name at that festival, Goodell Park, as well as a couple of other parks around the Columbus and Westerville area. I mean, everybody loved her. She was a people person. She was a great listener and a great friend. She was an avid photographer. She could take the simplest thing in nature and photograph it and make it look so beautiful. She loved life that much. And she loved people. She loved helping people. And she loved being a good friend. And she was a great friend.
Everything you're describing, Tondra, does not sound to me like someone who is suicidal, someone who wants to take their own life and just end it. It just doesn't sound that way.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Emily has dealt with, ups and downs in her life like we all have. And unfortunately, Matt, her husband, his son, had committed suicide. They were living with Matt and Emily, trying to get him help. He had a tumultuous relationship with his father. Emily loved Joey, his son, very much. She was very, very distraught when this happened. Unfortunately, Emily and I also had another friend, a girlfriend that we both knew very well, that unfortunately also took her life. And Emily was just always so sad and couldn't understand why somebody wouldn't reach out for help. I know for a fact, as well as everyone that knows Emily, if she was having trouble, she had great friends in her life, like me and so many others that have known her for 30 years. If she wasn't happy where she was, she would change it. She would not leave her friends and family grieving for her and not knowing what happened to her. That has never, ever been the way Emily is, the way she was. She would have reached out to somebody. And she did. We knew there were issues with her and Matt before all of this.
The last time you spoke with her, what was that conversation like?
over the phone. It had been a while. We had went out together, and myself and another roommate of ours that used to live with us, Teresa, we had all just went out for happy hour, laughing, taking pictures, being silly. That was Emily. That was Emily. A lot of times she may have put on a smile when she didn't feel like it, but that was also her. But we knew when she wasn't doing well. She wasn't someone that kept everything to herself. She talked to her friends.
What were the 3 months like when she was missing for 3 months? Was there interaction between her friends and her husband? Was he out there searching? Was he reaching out to you guys? What was that time period like?
It was a really weird period of time. In the beginning, Matt had phoned a friend and said, I think she's missing. What should I do? They called the police. Her friends immediately put up a Facebook page to help find Emily. We were the first ones to do that. Her husband did it a little later. He made his own flyers. He didn't put the Westerville Police anonymous tip hotline on there. He put his own phone number on. Call me if you have any tips. Even after we encouraged him to include all the Westerville police info and the anonymous tip hotline and the specific detectives to ask for, he still circulated his flyer with his personal information on it. In the beginning, of course, we're all trying to come together. It was very quickly that he distanced himself from all of Emily's friends. He had his page on Facebook, which seemed more like a poor Matt Facebook page than Let's Find Emily Facebook page. We were very diligent. We had a intricate map on Facebook, an interactive map that anybody that searched for Emily could go on there. If it was a huge area, they could narrow it down to we searched this north, east area of this park. We searched along this bankway, at this boating dock. We had that map public for everyone to see. The police even helped out with that. Wow. They would mark spots that they visited.
The contrast you're describing, Tandra, I hate to cut you off, but we are short on time tonight, but we're going to continue, obviously, to cover this story as we cover the trial here on Court TV. So we thank you. So sorry for your loss of your good friend, and I hope we can speak again.
We just want Emily. We just want justice for Emily. We've been waiting a long time. A lot of people are grieving. We want her remains put to rest and her family and friends to finally have peace and justice.
Tandra Van Allen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, when we come back, time to hear from you. Our 13th juror, Alec Baldwin, said he did not put his finger on the trigger. Why did he say that? We just got the report today from the FBI that the only way that gun fires is if your finger's on the trigger.
I take the gun out in the rehearsal. Really, he wants it very dramatic and very sudden, kind of sneak up on them. I take the gun out, and as it clears, as the barrel clears the hole, turn and cock the gun in the rehearsal. I turn and cock the gun goes off. It's supposed to be a cold gun.
Okay, that was that interview. In an interview with George Stephanopoulos, he also said very clearly, I did not have my finger on the trigger. FBI did a little report, tested the gun, figured out that the only way this particular gun can be fired, like some other guns as well, is if you pull back the hammer, then you have to press the trigger. Or you can have the trigger pulled already and pull back the hammer, and then it will fire. So, my 13th-juror question to you. Why do you think Alec Baldwin said his finger was not on the trigger? We begin with our 13th-juror comment of the day. This comes from Sue tonight. He wants to alleviate his guilt. He needs to tell himself that it wasn't his hand that killed her. Al Wunsch, why? Why did he say his finger was not on the trigger?
Once again, it's what he thought happened. I mean, I'm sure it was an instantaneous type situation. He may not remember whether he pulled the trigger or not.
There's a difference between not remembering and specifically saying, I did not put my finger on the trigger. There's a difference.
But you know what? I think that the 13th juror gave a perfect explanation. It may be to alleviate guilt. I don't think it demonstrates anything against Alec Baldwin in this. He shouldn't have been talking to the press and stuff like that. But in the interview with the police department, he said what he remembered. And he said what he believes is true. As we've used George Costanza before. It's not a lie, Vinnie, if you believe it.
Terry says after what happened, he may not remember. Those moments right after are very traumatic. The person to blame is the gun wrangler or whoever loaded the gun with real bullets. Actors are responsible for their actions, reactions, and dialogue, not props or the set. That is why there are so many key players on a movie or TV set, so one person does not have to do it all. Jennifer Brandt, your thoughts tonight. Why would he say his finger wasn't on the trigger?
Because, I mean, I agree with Al. It was such a quick thing, and he was practicing, and he just may not have realized it, may not have believed that his finger was actually on the trigger.
He's practicing right here, by the way. As he practices here, his finger is on the trigger. You see that?
Yeah, it definitely looks like it there, but
yeah.
I agree with the 13th juror. I mean, maybe it was just that it was so traumatic that he didn't recall that.
Yeah, then I think he would say, I don't recall. Rather, he's very specific. No, my finger was not on the trigger. I just pulled back the hammer. He specifically remembered pulling back the hammer, and then the gun fired, just like he said in the police interview. Darnell, Crosland, why do you think he's saying that?
Well, he shouldn't be saying anything because...
not so loud. The criminals will hear you.
I'm baffled by this entire thing. We heard testimony that the armorer is in charge of all of the gun handling, etc. The armorer in this case had a father who had experience. Leave Alec alone. Why are they pressing him so hard? He needs to stop talking.
Leave Alec alone. I said this at the top of the 8 o'clock hour when the show started. I said, I get attorneys on this show. They all love Alec Baldwin. They love him. We shall see if the DA loves him. Al Wunsch, Darnell, Cross, and Jennifer Brandt. Always amazing. Thank you. We'll be back with more right after this.